On May 22nd, 2013, Pearl Fernandez called 911 to report that her son, Gabriel Fernandez, wasn't breathing after hitting his head. But what paramedics saw when they arrived to the Fernandez's home told a different story. Gabriel was found naked with shattered ribs, a fractured skull, and BB pellets lodged in his skin. He was immediately rushed to the hospital where he was declared brain dead and died in the hospital 2 days later. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to GrayDays TV, and today I'm going to talk about the tragic story of Gabriel Fernandez, an 8-year-old boy who was starved, tortured, and ultimately murdered by his mother and her boyfriend. Gabriel Fernandez was born on February 20th, 2005, to Arnold Contreras and Pearl Fernandez. Shortly after birth, Gabriel was put in the custody of his great uncle on his mother's side, Michael Carranza, and his partner David Martinez, due to his mother not wanting him. They continued to raise him for 4 years. Then in 2009, Gabriel moved in with his grandparents, due to his grandfather's objection to his great uncle's same-sex relationship. He lived with his grandparents until 2012, when out of nowhere his biological mother, Pearl Fernandez, requested to regain custody of Gabriel. She claimed to social workers that she had concerns about how Gabriel was being treated, but other family members have said that they believe she only wanted custody of Gabriel for his welfare benefits. Gabriel's grandmother objected, telling deputies that Pearl neglected and abused her other children. But despite those claims, his mother did receive custody, and Gabriel moved in with her and her boyfriend, Isaro Igeri, as well as 2 siblings, an 11-year-old brother named Ezekiel and a 9-year-old sister, Virginia, in Palmdale in 2013. And throughout his 6-month stay in the household, Gabriel was repeatedly tortured and abused, and when it came to school, he was usually either late or didn't show up at all. When he was in school, he would kick other students, and on the rare occasion when he went outside for recess, he would usually stand alone by himself on the playground and kick a wall. One day, Gabriel asked his teacher, Jennifer Garcia, if it was normal for moms to hit their children. She said yes, because some parents spanked their kids, but asked him again at recess to clarify what he meant. He then asked if it was normal for moms to hit their kids with the belt buckle until it made them bleed. And shortly after that, his teacher began contacting social workers. She reported that Gabriel's face and hands had bruises from strikes with a belt buckle, and that he came to school with scratches, a split lip, and a swollen, bruised face. His mother, Pearl, later admitted to hitting him with the belt, but Gabriel's caseworkers at the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services didn't feel that the bruises required a doctor's visit or his removal from the home. Sometime later, on Monday, November 26th, Gabriel arrived late to class again. When the other children turned and looked at him, they laughed and pointed at what they saw. Someone had taken chunks of hair from his head, and it was so bad that scabs were forming on his scalp. His teacher, Garcia, called the principal to come to the room and take a look at Gabriel's head, but as Garcia later recalled, he told her, "We don't investigate, we just report what we see." So she called Gabriel's caseworker and left messages on 2 different numbers that the caseworker had given her. Gabriel was absent the next day, but on Thursday he arrived to school with a bruised lip. When the teacher asked him what happened, he replied that his mother punched him in the mouth. His teacher again called Gabriel's caseworker. This time she reached her and pressed her on what she was doing to help Gabriel. But the caseworker said due to confidentiality, she couldn't tell her what she was doing. As days passed and then weeks, Gabriel's situation only seemed to worsen. His teacher would sometimes find him crying at the end of the day, saying that he didn't want to go home. Near the end of January, Garcia was reading a book to a group of students when the door opened. It was Gabriel. This time the students didn't laugh, because they didn't understand what they saw. Gabriel's eyes were swollen and little round bruises dotted his face. When his teacher first questioned Gabriel, he lied to her and told her that he failed. But after further questioning, he told her the truth, that his mother shot him in the face with a BB gun. He also went on to tell his teacher that the reason he lied to her was because whenever a social worker visited the home, after they left, his punishments would increase. His teacher went on to call Gabriel's caseworker again, hoping that finally something would get done. What she didn't know is that the caseworker was actually following up on her concerns, performing several house visits, but not doing much after that. The caseworker's last visit being on January 29, 2013, after Gabriel's teacher reported that Pearl Fernandez shot Gabriel in the face with a BB gun. Gabriel told her that the bruises on his face were because he had fallen while playing tag with his brother and sister, which is obviously a lie, but the caseworker never questioned Gabriel without his parents present. But for some reason, the caseworker decided to believe that story and only recommended that Gabriel and Pearl take part in voluntary family maintenance, which allows children to remain in the home while the family works to resolve their issues, which would only be considered the appropriate course to take in low-risk cases. Gabriel Fernandez's case was considered high risk. The Family Preservation Unit officially took over Gabriel's case on February 1st. And were expected to send a caseworker to the Fernandez home every 2 weeks, and to supplement those visits with family and individual counseling sessions. On February 27, 2013, Carmen Norgant, the therapist, discussed suicide notes with Pearl that Gabriel had written. One addressed to his mother said, "I love you so much that I will die." Others stated he wanted to kill himself, which he then told his therapist that he was serious about. His therapist then informed the social workers assigned to his case, but nothing was done. She also called 911, but the officer that visited the home didn't even talk to Gabriel. On March 26, 2013, the intern therapist also reported that Gabriel told her that a family member forced him to perform oral sex on them. When social workers interviewed Gabriel about those allegations, his mother Pearl was present, and he took back each of those stories. But despite these allegations and the clear abuse that Gabriel was suffering, his caseworkers decided that they were going to close his case. And despite the risk level being considered very high, one of the social workers went in manually and changed it to moderate, then closed his case. On April 26, Pearl Fernandez was at the welfare office with her children when a security guard saw what trained professionals somehow couldn't see: that Gabriel Fernandez was a victim of extreme abuse and needed to be rescued. Pearl was yelling at Gabriel to sit when the security guard Martinez told her to tone it down. When he looked at Gabriel, he saw cigarette burns all over Gabriel's head and neck. He also noted that Gabriel's wrist had ligature marks as if he had been tied up. Gabriel, he later testified, turned around and made eye contact with me, and I noticed he had a greenish-bluish eye, a black eye, and lumps on the back of his head. His skin was almost yellow, like he'd been starving or something. Gabriel's eyes seemed to ask Martinez for help, but Pearl noticed that Martinez was looking at Gabriel and quickly grabbed him and the rest of her children and left, blocking Martinez's view of Gabriel on the way out. Martinez approached the window where Pearl was talking to the clerk and asked her if she was going to report Pearl to the authorities. She then went on to say that she wanted to help but couldn't because she was just filling in. That wasn't her normal position. He pressed and she reluctantly went to ask the supervisor if she could do anything, only to come back a few moments later saying that she was ordered not to get involved. Martinez then went on to call his own supervisor, and he was told basically the same thing she was told, that it's not your job and not part of your duties. Martinez returned to his desk in disbelief, but sometime later the clerk came and slipped him the name and address of the family and told him to save this kid. He called the Department of Children and Family Services twice, but got lost in the automated service and hung up. He called 911, but the operator told him that the situation didn't sound like an emergency, so they gave him the number to non-emergencies. He then called that number and was later told that a sheriff's deputy went to the Fernandez's home, but didn't see anything wrong. And around this time, Gabriel came to class looking worse than he ever had before. He had a red eye, his face, neck, and ears were marked with bruises, and his forehead skin was peeling. His teacher asked if he wanted to take part in today's assignment, which was making a Mother's Day card. He wanted to and worked very hard on it. The card, shaped like a house, said "Open the door to see who loves you," with his picture glued inside. His teacher called his caseworker and left her another message, but the caseworker never made an entry of that phone call. 1 week before his death, Gabriel's school, Summerwind Elementary, asked a sheriff's deputy to investigate, but he received the wrong address. But he did get the correct phone number, and when he reached Pearl, she told him that Gabriel moved to Texas with his grandmother. Whether he tried or even had time to follow up on this claim is unknown. By this time, his siblings later testified, Gabriel was spending most of his days and nights in the cubby. The cubby being a cabinet where Gabriel would be locked in with a sock in his mouth and handcuffs around his ankles. Ezekiel, Gabriel's brother, said that he would sometimes try to crack open the padlocked door to sneak Gabriel some food because his mother and her boyfriend weren't feeding him. He also said that his mother and her boyfriend would threaten him if he didn't join in on the beating of Gabriel, also saying that he would whisper in Gabriel's ear to fall quickly so that he wouldn't have to keep hitting him. On May 22nd, Pearl and Gary tortured Gabriel for the last time. They turned to the tools they would use regularly on him: a BB gun, pepper spray, a coat hanger, and a wooden baseball bat. After the beating, Pearl found Virginia, Gabriel's sister, on the edge of her bed where she sat frozen during most of the beating. And his sister later stated that Pearl made her soak up Gabriel's blood off the floor before they called 911. And when Pearl and her boyfriend did call 911, they told operators that Gabriel wasn't breathing, with her boyfriend claiming that the injuries came from Gabriel and his brother roughhousing. When paramedics arrived, Ezekiel, Gabriel's brother, guided the paramedics inside, not saying a word. The medics felt 2 fractures in Gabriel's skull. He had broken ribs, some of his teeth had been kicked out, BB pellets were all over his skin, and cigarette burns covered his feet and genitals. His neck had been stripped a layer of skin, and cat feces were found in his throat. Paramedics rushed Gabriel to Children's Hospital Los Angeles, but doctors pronounced him brain dead the same day. He remained on life support for 2 days and died on May 24th, 2013. And due to the amount of injuries on his body, the autopsy took 2 days, which is extremely out of the ordinary. In June 2018, after 5 hours of deliberation, jurors found Pearl Fernandez and her boyfriend Asaro guilty of murder and torture. Pearl Fernandez pleaded guilty to avoid a death sentence and instead received life in prison without the possibility of parole. An eviction she is currently trying to have vacated due to changes made to the penal code in 2019. And a hearing on the petition of resentencing will be held on June 1st of 2021. Her boyfriend Asaro, on the other hand, did receive the death sentence.
Pat, the judge told that couple that he hopes that they wake up at night and are tortured by thoughts of what they've done to this young boy. This is a case that has really touched so many because of the sheer brutality of the torture and abuse of this young boy by the 2 people who should have been taking care of him.
The conduct was horrendous, inhumane, and nothing short of evil.
After calling this the worst case of abuse he has seen in his 20 years on the bench, Judge George Lamelli sentenced Isaro Aguirre to death for torturing and murdering 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez. His girlfriend, the boy's mother, Pearl Fernandez, received life in prison for her role.
It is unimaginable the pain that this child probably endured.
Gabriel had a cracked skull, broken ribs, burns, and BB pellets lodged in his body.
I want to say I'm sorry to my family for what I did. I want to say I'm sorry for this, what happened. I wish Gabriel was alive. Every day I wish that I made better choices.
Aguirre didn't speak in court, and neither did the boy's biological father, who is in custody on an unrelated charge. But he said he wanted to listen to the sentencing and to the other family members who spoke at the hearing.
After the death of Gabriel Fernandez, the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services fired 4 employees for their failure to help him. The 4 were also charged with 1 felony count each of child abuse and falsifying public records. They each faced up to 10 years in prison if found guilty. However, the charges were ultimately dismissed for lack of probable cause. But the one good thing that did come out of this is that the DCFS did ramp up on hiring more workers and updating the training, so hopefully something like this doesn't happen again. And on February 26, 2020, Netflix released a documentary called The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez, which focused on what happened to Gabriel and the failures of the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. Because at the end of the day, there was about 64 reports from family members, teachers, and others to the DCFS about Gabriel, and nothing was done. So there obviously needs to be a lot of changes in that area. And I suggest if you haven't watched that documentary, you should take out the time to watch it. I mean, I kind of gave a overall generalization of the entire thing, but there are details that I left out. Like always, there's stuff that I didn't put into it. So if you want to learn more, like always, there are links in the description where I got all this information And obviously you can go on Netflix and watch that documentary if you would like. And this case actually reminds me a lot of a case I did a while ago on a boy named Adrian Jones. He was tortured and ultimately killed by his parents, by his father. And it's a tragic case, and it reminds me a lot of this case actually. So if you want to check that out, there will probably be a little pop-up over here or over here. I'm not really sure where, but definitely check that out if you haven't heard of it. It's equally as upsetting as this is. It's ridiculous that something like this even happens, and it probably happens a lot more often than we actually think it does, which is terrifying, especially when you consider how many opportunities the caseworkers had to help him and they did nothing. But I don't really have too much to add to this. I mean, I think anyone who knows anything about this case understands how just horrible it was. I'm actually surprised that the social workers were able to get those charges dropped. I mean, you kind of want someone to blame for it. I mean, obviously his mother and her boyfriend deserved a lot of the blame, but those caseworkers had the opportunity to help him and they didn't. So I'm sure a lot of people, me included, probably think that they should have faced some type of punishment for that, but that's just how the system works sometimes, I guess. Anyway, let me know what you think about this case. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, leave suggestions for other videos that I should do. I promise you I'll see them. I really appreciate you guys watching the video. And like always, I will see you next video.